Hello, today's episode is about nuclear revenge, and I have some incredibly cathartic stories lined up, so once you're done with this episode, you're going to feel amazing. Our first story is titled, Bully Tries to Act Like It Was in School. Guess I'll tell on you then. In secondary school, I was tormented by a specific bully. For years I was beaten up and publicly humiliated on a daily basis. The worst thing he did was beat me up so bad that I got a concussion and broken ribs when I was 14. He never faced consequences in school because his family was rich and he was pretty popular. For context, I live in a pretty small town in England, so everyone knows everyone, including the bully. He left school when I was 17, and I didn't see him for about a year. Around this time, I got way more popular and started making more friends. But annoyingly, he was friends with some of my friends, and his girlfriend was at my school, but I managed to avoid him mostly until I finished school. Unfortunately, I saw him a few months later when me and my friends went to a pub to celebrate our exam results. He was a complete arsehole to me. He started insulting me and mocking me to my friends, saying, "Why do you hang out with him?" and bringing up a bunch of stuff from years ago. At one point, even put me in a headlock and told me that my friends only hang out with me out of pity. I wasn't going to take it, but I also wasn't going to get into a punch-up because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of getting me angry. And right at that moment, I overheard the perfect thing. He was bragging to his friends about the house party he was having and saying about all the drugs he was going to take to the party. And he said he had it all in his car. And this wasn't just a bit of weed either. If I remember correctly, he said he had 13 bags of coke, about 30 pills of MDMA, and 7 or 8 grams of ketamine. And then I knew what I would do for my revenge on the guy. As he was leaving, I followed him to his car and took a photo of his number plate. Then, after he was driving off, I walked off and called the police. I knew I needed something more than hearsay for the police to stop the car, so I told the police I saw the bully snorting a white powder in the pub toilets. This was a complete fabrication. And then get into the driver's side of a car. I then provided them with the license plate of the car and told them the direction they were headed in. I honestly didn't think they were going to stop him, or maybe they would just ask him questions later and ruin his party, but the driving on drugs allegation, plus the fact he'd been arrested for minor possession before, which I didn't know at the time, was enough for the police to take it seriously and stop and search his car. When they did, they found all the drugs he was transporting to his party and he got arrested for it. The consequences of his arrest meant he lost out on his place in university, and his rich parents had enough of his behaviour, so they kicked him out and cut him off from their funds. I also heard a rumour that, in turn for a lower sentence, my bully ratted out his supplier. This resulted in him getting stabbed multiple times, and as a consequence of that, now has to wear a colostomy bag. That plus his criminal record means he is currently unemployed. Well, that guy was an absolute scumbag. It just goes to show you need to be careful who you bully. Or just don't bully anyone, obviously the better option. Revenge on a hacker. One day I get an email from a hosting provider telling me that attacks are being launched from our server and I need to look into it. I find that there is indeed a hacker in our server. He was using an app to anonymously control his bot network, among other things. I looked at the app he was using and discovered that it was an open source project. I then downloaded the code for this backdoor, modified it to log everything into a file, and replaced his app with my honeypot version. Over the next 6 months, I collected every scrap of information I could on this guy. I then used that information to take over many of his online accounts, including his main email account. That was the account where he'd registered all of his services to, so I was able to issue password reset requests for everything he owned. I gained control over 6 other email accounts, 24 IRC accounts, his Facebook page, his dating profile, numerous websites, and the backup site he used for his cell phone. I have his phone number, his mum's number, and his girlfriend's number. I know his address, his birthday, the schools he went to, and even his favourite foods and music. After I took down every single online account he ever had, I sent a nasty email to his ISP, internet service provider, in an effort to extort even more information from them. What more information is there to even get? It sounds like you could completely overthrow this guy's online presence at this point. In that email, I said some very unkind things about the monarch of Indonesia and how I might smear the monarch publicly if I don't get the information. The hacker disappeared immediately after that. I've looked for him at times over the last 15 years since, and he has not resurfaced. The Indonesian laws regarding insults to the monarchy are not to be trifled with. The prison term for such an offence is 15 years. While it's possible this guy is in prison, or worse, for defaming the Indonesian president, I think you successfully eliminated a hacker from the world, potentially saving many innocent, vulnerable people from similar attacks. I approve of this revenge, though OP does say in the comments, the idea that I may have gotten him killed is something that haunts me. The next post is called "Excuse me Satan, I think you're in my seat." It's very long and I haven't read it yet, but the comments make it seem like it's probably worth it. I'm going to start the story off by saying that this is absolutely not one of my most shining moral moments, and that I'm well aware that I was a straight up asshole for doing what I did. My only real defence is that I was in a super bad place mentally and needed a mountain's worth of therapy. If you're curious about the circumstances around her, check my profile. Bitch was evil in human form. Now, on with the revenge. I was a weird kid growing up. Really weird. It was mostly because I was abused at home and forcibly isolated. My social skills were so underdeveloped that I had difficulty reading human faces aside from my grandmother, grandfather and father. Being the weird kid meant that I was a juicy target for bullies. It never stopped, but there was one bully that I hated more than any of the others. We'll call her Holly. This girl never passed up an opportunity to make my life hell, and since she lived across the street from me, there was nowhere I could avoid her. Holly treated me like garbage. Here are a few examples. She put dog crap in our mailbox on a regular basis. She let my dog out of the yard and I was never able to get her back. She would also sit on her front porch with her friends and roast the hell out of me to entertain them if I so much as put a toe outside of my front door. It went on for years. I hated her with the fiery passion of 1,000 suns, but while my grandmother was still alive, there was nothing I could do about Holly. If I did anything to her or fought back in any way, my grandmother would punish me for it, and I was more afraid of her than I was for Holly. For very good reason. So I made a plan. I suffered through all the abuse and promised myself that when I was older, I would make Holly pay for what she did to me. Thinking of what I was going to do to her when the time was right was sometimes the only thing that kept me going. Over time, Holly grew up, and eventually she left me alone and stopped being an asshole. Unfortunately for her, by then it was too late. I didn't give a shit about her new moral epiphany. I had been nursing my grudge for 2 decades and it was time for a reckoning. I was going to destroy that bitch. When my grandmother finally died, it was go time, and I'd had 20 years to plan. I wasn't idle while I waited. I'd made it my mission in life to learn as much about Holly as possible, and to do it, I became friends with a few people on the periphery of her social circle. Eventually, I knew more about her and her life than her own mother did. The first step I took in my plan was getting her fired from her job. It took longer than I would have liked, but eventually I managed it. Holly worked at a doctor's office, and I knew that the doctor she worked for was super Christian. A very straight edge and upstanding type of guy. He also had a huge influence on the local community. I decided to become a patient at his office, scheduling my visits to be on the days Holly was off work. After a couple of visits, I just happened to notice Holly in the staff photo on the waiting room wall. I made a show of looking surprised and then concerned. I got to the exam room and the doctor came in shortly after. The expression on my face got his attention and he asked me what was wrong. I told him that even though I didn't want to, as a Christian, I couldn't keep my knowledge a secret and still sleep at night because I just couldn't let him endanger his soul and reputation by doing nothing. I had his full attention. Then I asked him as one fellow Christian to another not to tell anyone where he got the information I was about to give him. After he promised he would, I told him that I knew Holly was using illegal drugs. He was absolutely floored, and at first he didn't believe me. I told him that I understood his skepticism entirely, but it was easy enough to prove or disprove my information with a drugs test. If I was wrong, he lost nothing. If I was right, he was saving himself from trouble down the road. He finally agreed to test her, and he tested everyone else too so that it didn't look like Holly was the only target. See, I wasn't actually lying. Holly smoked a shitload of weed, and I knew that because it was my dad that she used to get it from. He'd been her weed dude since she was like 15. Her test came back positive for marijuana and, much to my surprise, Xanax. The doctor fired Holly on the spot when the results for the urinalysis came back, and then he called me to thank me for telling him what was going on. And before he hung up, he told me that I truly walked with the Lord. You will never know how hard I had to fight not to laugh at the depths of his wrongness. I thought I was going to pop a blood vessel. Phase 1 complete. I know what you're thinking, it's just a job, and it's not like she can't go get another one, right? Losing a job isn't the end of the world. You'd be wrong. Remember how I said that her boss had a very high reputation in our area? That man called every single hospital and doctor's office in the state personally to make sure that none of them would hire Holly and risk liability and loss of community trust for associating with her. Holly's field of study was all pertaining to the medical profession, so her education was rendered worthless because nobody would hire her. I wasn't done yet. Nope, not even close. She lost her job, and because she had no income, her car got repossessed. She still had her family though. 2 kids and her fiancé. Who needs families, am I right? Starting to sound a bit crazy. With the help of a good friend of mine, we catfished the fuck out of her fiancé. My friend is hot AF, and she let me use pictures of her to prove that she was really real. She even got on Skype with him once. When he finally made arrangements for a face-to-face encounter and booked a hotel room, I texted the screenshots of everything to Holly from a burner number. To say the excrement impacted the oscillating unit would be a vast understatement. They broke up. The whole thing was an ordeal and Holly was devastated. She had 2 kids, no job, and now no fiancé who could help her keep the family afloat. A normal person would have stopped then. Unfortunately, I am not normal, and I was going full scorched earth. I seethed for 20 years. No way in hell was I going easy on her. I don't think at this point that anyone can accuse you of going easy on her. Phase 3. With her fiancé gone and no job, Holly was struggling badly. She needed money and she needed it quickly before she and the kids got evicted. Meth is a giant problem in my area. Oh god. It's high risk, but it's also fast money, so I started subtly mentioning Holly's situation among my more legally questionable family. Eventually, one of my family's friends, who happened to be a meth cook, got in contact with Holly and offered her a shitload of cash to let him cook dope at her house. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, 2 days and then done forever. Holly was desperate, so she said yes. Everything went smoothly at first, but dead in the middle of the cook, someone called in an anonymous tip about an active cook in progress to the local narcotics unit. They rolled up on Holly's house about 3 AM and caught everybody inside, including Holly red-handed making meth. Watching her cry when they handcuffed her and put her in the police cruiser was one of my most gloriously satisfying moments of my life. She was in deep legal doo-doo, and to make a bad situation even worse, most houses where labs are discovered aren't deemed habitable afterwards because of the toxic fumes. It's up to the property owner to either hire a hazmat team to clean it or condemn it and tear it down. A lab cleanup costs thousands of dollars. It would have cost more money to clean it than the entire property was worth. So it got torn down, with everything Holly owned still inside. Holly ended up in jail for a while, and while she was gone, the court gave their father, her ex-fiancé, sole custody of their children, and Holly was given only supervised visitation. 2 hours every Saturday, if I recall correctly. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and mine was freezing. I was behind every single bad thing that happened in Holly's life, in one way or another, for an entire 5-year period. She decided she liked bullying me and making my life hell, and she figures there would never be any consequences. Instead, I took her reputation, her job, her fiancé, got her arrested and convicted of a felony, and her children taken away from her. And the best part is that she has no clue I did it to this very day. She'd forgotten about me, What she did to me impacted my life forever, but to her it wasn't even important enough for her to even bother remembering. I was nothing to her, so she never connected me to her problems. Last I heard, she was in rehab for alcoholism and had her parental rights terminated permanently. After she lost her kids, she just sort of gave up and crawled into a bottle and never came out of it. I was tempted to tell her, but I decided that the helplessness and confusion about why everything suddenly went to hell was the better plan. Because that means that every now and again I can contact her and pretend to give a shit about her troubles to get a fresh revenge boner about her newest tale of woe. She thinks I'm the nicest person she's ever met. Wow, that was a rollercoaster. I know I said that would be long, but that was incredibly long. I hope you at least found it as entertaining as I did. But again, it sounds like Holly, quote unquote, just messed with the wrong person. OP obviously has a strong, lifelong fixation with destroying this person, bordering on mental disorder. Did she go too far though? A lot of people in the comments seem to think so. My only problem with it is that she terrorised you as a kid, and now she's an adult, undoubtedly a different person. No one's proud of who they were when they were a kid, and no one can change it. While you were quite vague in your posts as to what she actually did to you other than making your life hell, it must have been cataclysmic. Oh, saying that, there is actually a comment from OP going into that a bit. She says, "A lot of people are under the impression that the things Holly did to me were minor and didn't merit my reaction, because the ones I spoke about were so small. I guess I was trying to make myself a little less pathetic in front of people. She did way more to me than the specifics I mentioned. It's just embarrassing to admit to being weak enough that she could do it all to me. She beat my ass more than a few times. Once, she and her friends force-fed me actual No, I don't know what kind. Probably better that way. She shoved me down an embankment and chipped my front tooth on a cinder block. The list goes on, and I don't really feel like going into it, but suffice to say it wasn't just teasing. It doesn't make what I did much better, but I didn't do it over something minor. I am also female. Yeah, that is pretty messed up. That is something that will make you hate someone to their very core." Thank you very much for listening. If you have any incredibly satisfying revenge stories, please leave a comment, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot.